evening. I am Maven of the Eventide, and welcome to Vampire Interviews, which is not where I interview vampires yet. But tonight, we have the very special honor of interviewing one of Interview of the Vampires extras. The fabulous Kristi Alyssa is one of my personal friends who just so happens to have gotten a job working on AMC's Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire when it was filming in New Orleans earlier this year. While she was working on the job, she couldn't tell us anything. It was all top secret. I knew she was down there, but I didn't know anything about what was going on. And now that 3 episodes of the show have come out on AMC Plus, and all the parts that she filmed have been shown to us, she can finally tell us all about her experience. And I cannot wait to hear everything and share it with you. So thank you for joining me tonight to hear her story. You are in for a bloody good treat. Kristi, hi! Thanks for joining us.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me.
It's so good to see you. I haven't seen you in like a year almost, right?
Almost a year, yeah.
At the vampire ball.
We get to see each other soon, though.
At the next vampire ball.
Yes.
So you were in AMC's Interview with the Vampire. You said you filmed like 5 scenes, right?
Yes. Yes.
Not all of them made it into the final cut, but 2 of them really, really did, right?
Yes, so far.
So let's watch your scenes together.
Sounds good.
Sir, we got bad trouble.
I apologize.
There you are. I see you right there.
I was only trying to show you my love.
Oh, now the focus is on you.
Connie hit me.
Oh, I'm a Connie now. A minute ago, I was his love.
Hitting on me?
He's blocking you. He needs to move to the left. There you are again.
My shit box.
I did no such thing.
Hell, I might have even said yes if you just asked, but I don't care who he is. You put a dick in an asshole without asking, that's against Jesus. Fuck you.
What y'all laughing at? Someone go fetch
Your face is perfect.
You get some clean water and a towel. You gonna make me regret.
That's your fan, isn't it?
Repeat yourself, Mr. Fenwick.
I was flapping back.
Yes.
Louis de Point du Lac, sir.
Oh, Pond du Lac. Oh, forgive me. There's so much wine.
Don't worry none.
Oh, Miss Williams. Isn't she a vision?
I ain't cleaning his dick.
Oh, Jesus, Mary.
Got a situation here, Finn.
Yeah, well, you got another one outside 122. Man acting the maggot, driving away business.
Isn't that what I pay you for?
It's a citizen priest.
Do you not realize, sister, your body is part of
So-
Christ the Lord?
Second time, Miss
Was the idea that you all followed him out onto the street?
He's your brother, Mr. Doolittle.
Yes.
You deny your victory with Christ. He shall come again to judge the living
Because you guys were nosy?
At the time, I didn't know these 2 scenes actually went together when we filmed it. So that was kind of a surprise to me.
Told me to come,
Oh,
Louis.
there you are.
In my head, like a family of birds, many voices, but also one voice.
Saying it a second time.
Listen to me, please.
I'm having a fucking night, okay? I can't have it with your food. Get on home, else I'll bleed you like a cochon, bruh. Did I want to pull a knife on my brother? No. But as I alluded to before, you couldn't look weak.
Fade out on
liberty.
Christie, fade in on the steps.
You never knew who was watching.
I love those rack focuses. Like sometimes they're really crisp and clear, and then other times it just pulls back.
Yeah. It was interesting because that one of the scenes was filmed in February and the other in May. And I was aware that they were both like early on in the series, but I didn't know they happened right back to back.
So you actually filmed the second scene first, right?
Yes, that's correct. And then when I watched it with all my friends, I was like, oh, okay, there's the other scene. It's right there.
So you didn't get to see a script or anything. You didn't know what you were doing.
We did see a script for that scene inside of the brothel.
But not like a full script that showed the order.
No, definitely not.
Okay, so before we talk any more about this, tell us a little about you. Introduce yourself.
I'm Kristi Alyssa. My profession, I'm a professional circus artist. I've been a circus artist for 15 years. I live in the Chicagoland area. And around the time of filming, I was kind of back and forth to New Orleans, like exploring some circus down there and just like enjoying the city for a while. But that's what I do as my full-time job. I teach and I perform the circus arts.
So you're not generally an extra actor.
No, this was my second time actually was Interview with the Vampire and now I've done 3 different TV or film productions.
Cool. So why did you want to get a part in this show? It wasn't where you live. You're in Chicagoland. This was filming way down in New Orleans. You aren't a local actor, but you're a fan of Interview with the Vampire. So what made you want to go for this and to put in that kind of commitment?
Yeah, so I was down there for about a month and a half in November, which is around the time when like all of the filming started. So I heard about it and then I found out about the casting agency for background actors called Caballero Casting. And I was like, it's a long shot. Like I've been a lifelong fan of Anne Rice. And I'm like, that seems like it'd be fun. Like I love performing. I love Anne Rice. So I applied for it. And I did not hear back until January. So at that time, I was already out of New Orleans, but then I ended up just flying back and forth to film a total of 4 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
So besides those 2 scenes, the other scenes that you filmed, was it supposed to be the same character?
Yes. Yeah. So I played what they called a Liberty Girl, which was basically Louis' like lower end brothel. And so the whole time I played the same character. I had a couple different costumes, but I was supposed to be the same Liberty Girl.
So the other times you would have been in the scene, even if we don't see it on screen, you're there while they were filming it, are the times that are in that Liberty neighborhood, that street where those other scenes were.
So that outdoor set was primarily where I filmed 3 nights on that outdoor set, which was absolutely incredible in person. And then that indoor closed set, the brothel, was in the exact same like physical location, but it was like inside the warehouse with the indoor scene. So I was all like in the Liberty Street.
I remember when you were first looking at the casting and you were kind of telling us, you know, this casting call came up, maybe I'll go for this part, or this one came up, maybe I'll go for this part. When this particular part came up, you were a little unsure about going for this. I remember at the start.
Yeah. This particular Liberty Girl that I played was contracted to be topless. And as you can see on that scene, I'm not quite topless, but I'm showing a lot. And so I was a little bit hesitant at that first because I was like, oh, wow, this is like my second time working in a professional film environment, and like going kind of like that much of a newbie right into like a topless role felt like a lot. But in the end, the whole experience was super, super comfortable. And I'm very glad I did it. But yeah, that was my initial hesitation. Like, oh, what is that going to be like? Is it going to be nervous? Is it going to be scary? But it was great.
How did they make it comfortable for you? Like, what was the experience like? What was it like getting there with the costumes and everything else and being so exposed?
So in talking specifically about being contracted to be topless, I was down in New Orleans was the day before my costume fitting. And I got this call from this lovely human being on the phone. She had a British accent. I think she introduced herself as Val, but she was like, you know, this is Val, your intimacy coordinator with Interview with the Vampire, which was simultaneously the coolest call I've ever gotten in my life. And I was like, oh, being such a newbie to like film, I was like, great, what's an intimacy coordinator? So what that ended up meaning was every single time you were on set, and it wasn't just me, it was all of any actor who played a character of like sensitive nature. So even if you were not contracted to be topless or to be nude, just because you were playing a working girl, you had access to the intimacy coordinator. And this was a professional that just kind of like hung out with us on set all day. And she kept her primary job was like checking in on consent. So if the director wanted something, she would come up to the actors and she'd be like, is this okay? Would you like me to negotiate this? If at any time somebody was uncomfortable with something, she would be the person who would talk to the director. She was also in charge of like handing us our robe. She was honestly very wonderful. And to have the presence of we actually worked with, I think there was 2 or 3 different women. To have the presence of that intimacy coordinator really like felt like somebody was like holding my hand and guiding me through it. And I had somebody who I can go to if I just needed to talk to somebody. So yeah, she made me feel very comfortable on set.
So I remember you telling me that when you were ready to film that very first scene we see you in, something happened, right?
Yes. So I flew down, I believe that was January, right? I got the call that it was cast in that role. And I had a week to get down to New Orleans. So that was a little wild. And so I went down there and we did our costume fitting, we did our COVID testing. And then the day of filming, we arrive on set, we get our hair and our wardrobe and our makeup done. And then we sit around. And as you know, Interview with the Vampire was filmed most exclusively at night. So we're sitting there, it's 8 p.m., it's 10 p.m., it's midnight, it's 1, it's 2, it's 3 in the morning, it's 4 in the morning. And we're like, oh, okay, like, you know, when are we going in? And we're all like very eager and anxious because they had like read the script and we were all like excited and nervous. And then somebody, I think the PA, the production assistant, came out and was like, good news and bad news. Good news, you're still getting paid. Bad news is there was too much blood involved in the scene they were filming before our scene. So the scene is going to be rescheduled, which ended up being really funny because, as you can see, that was one of the very first scenes in the whole series. And it ended up being rescheduled all the way in May. And I remember the director saying on set, like, as we like wrapped that scene, being like, this was one of the very first scenes written and the very last scene filmed.
I remember you were really nervous that they might just cut the scene. It might not happen. But now that we've seen the scene, I don't know how they could have cut it. Like, that's an important scene. It's introducing all the characters.
Yeah. Bricktop Williams, she's hilarious in it. Yeah, there was a lot of like, it was, so we started like this chat, myself and the other Liberty girls, and we were very much like, when are they going to call us down? We're all kind of like living in anticipation for it because that was like our more featured scene compared to like the street scene. So we were all really excited about it. But it turns out it worked out just at the very end of filming.
So there's a bunch of you in that doorway and we can't really see everyone. You get seen a lot. You had a pretty prominent spot there. That's really cool. What was it like when they were just choosing who to put who where and like how they arranged that?
Yeah. So there's 6 of us there that evening and 2 of us were contracted to be potentially topless. And so myself and then the other actor, and she's a lovely person, we're kind of like pushed a little bit forward. And I think that was maybe intentional, but otherwise, honestly, you just kind of arrive at set and the background extra director, there's probably a better term for that, as I'm new to the film industry, would just place you. And I thought it was very fascinating. You just kind of like stand in a line and then they would come up to you and they would draw you out and they would put you in a spot. And then you would do a rehearsal and sometimes they would move people around, but it honestly seemed kind of random. Like there wasn't really any discussion about it.
So what was it like filming that first scene? You've got Bricktop, Louis, and Fenwick in that scene. Those are 3 really great characters.
Oh my gosh, hilarious. So that scene is very, very funny. And we did it, like, I don't know, maybe 4 hours of just repeating that scene over and over again. And it was the last scene that I filmed. I had already been on set 3 other nights before that. So I actually think because the filming schedule got flip-flopped, that was like better for my nerves because I was already like, okay, I kind of know what to expect. But it was very, very funny because it's a funny scene, as you can see. And then the actor that plays Fenwick, the one bleeding on the floor, he stayed very method acting the entire night. So he just acted drunk the whole night. It was very funny. And he didn't really move from his spot because they had like this like blood thing tied up to him to squirt the blood out. And then Miss Bricktop Williams would sometimes like kind of banter back and forth with him between takes, or sometimes she'd turn around and she would like gas us up and tell us we were beautiful. She was so nice. And then the actor, Jacob Anderson, Louis, and then the doctor would kind of like be in the hallway behind us in between takes, just kind of like hanging out with us. So the scene was very fun to film.
I remember you said that while you were waiting around, you were sitting in another part of the set?
Yes. So holding is like where you wait to film your scene. And I think it's because this was like the very last day of filming that we weren't like hanging out in our traditional holding area for the background extras like the previous scenes. They actually let us sit on like half deconstructed scenes of the set. And so to my nerdy fan heart excitement, they placed us into, I think it's Lestat's living room with Louis Lestat and Claudia's coffins. And so I walk in, the secret fan, and I'm just like, oh my God, it's their coffins. Like, it was so cool. And we got to hang out on that set, which was really awesome. They had the coffins and the piano and that grand, beautiful staircase you see. And I think it's episode 2 when they bring the salesman in. But yeah, it was very awesome to get to see. I mean, the outdoor set was so incredible on such a big magnitude, but the inside set to like see the details, like it was great.
In one of your scenes that we think probably didn't make the cut because we haven't seen it yet, when you're out on the street, you said that you got to work with some animals.
Yeah, we got, that was filming in February. It was absolutely freezing.
Did you say it was the one where they're driving the car?
No, those are 2 separate scenes.
Okay, so this was a scene where they're walking down the street. Louis and Lestat.
I actually did not see Louis and Lestat. I think it was just an establishing shot.
Okay.
Because the camera was kind of like moving up in the air and there was like a lot of street scene stuff happening.
So this is just extras, establishing shot of Liberty Street.
I think so. If they were there, I missed them. I don't know where they were at that moment. I was preoccupied with the dog.
The dog. Tell us about the dog.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, it was a great scene. So it was absolutely freezing that night. And we were on set all night. I'm from Chicago, so I didn't know New Orleans could even get that level of cold. And we get called back out to do this other scene. And me and one of the other Liberty girls were sat outside, like on the porch of one of the houses. And to like our great surprise, they handed us these 2 little dogs. And they asked us if we would work with them. And we were like, yes, because we were cold and they were warm and snuggly. Also, we love dogs. So they hand us, I feel bad. I forgot the name of the other dog, but one of them was named, they gave us this wriggling little dog and they said, this is Bilbo Baggins. And it just made my world. And it's like little, like squirmy, like bug-eyed dog is like, of course, this is Bilbo Baggins. They handed us some treats that we kind of like hid in our skirts and they told us some commands that the dogs know. And I mean, these dogs were awesome. Like we basically would say like, watch me. And then the dog would like look at you and then you feed him a little treat. We held him on our laps. And at the same time, there were these big dogs running across the street where an animal trainer was kind of hiding behind a bush off camera. And I was the most amazed to watch these big dogs because they waited across the street on their mark, on their cue. And keep in mind, the street had cars going past, those old 1920s cars, horses, lots of extras. So it was pretty chaotic. And the animal trainer would just wait behind the bush and just give a hand signal, not even a verbal signal. And those 2 big dogs would leave their mark, run across the street and kind of like put their paws up right by where me and the other extra were sitting with our dogs. So it was very cool to like work with the animal actors, but to also see like how it worked and watch the animal trainers do their thing. I mean, I was very impressed. My dogs do not behave that well.
So when you got the part and it was contracted for a topless part, it was only meant to be topless in that first scene and the rest of the scenes.
Yes. Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, because there's a different pay rate. You also have to sign I think it's, what's the technical term? It's like a tech writer, a release form for every night that you film topless. You have to like sign it. And yeah, it was only for that interior brothel scene. I wasn't topless or contracted to be topless for all the street scenes, but there were other ladies who were that night.
So in this scene, what was your costume like since we didn't get to see this one?
It was the same as what I was wearing inside the brothel.
The blue skirt in the white top, but the top was done up this time.
Yeah, it was closed, which was a very funny experience because costumes basically said, don't lift your arms above your head because it would rip. Because these costumes are authentic vintage. And because I'm a professional aerialist, I have like kind of like bigger muscles around here. And when that shirt was closed, I like could not move in it. But yeah, there was, I think I was fitted for like 5 costumes and I filmed in 3 of them.
So what was the other scene?
The other scene that did not make it. Mm-hmm. Or at least as far as I think it didn't make it. It was me and a couple other working ladies and a couple gentlemen. We're leaning against the doorway and we had fake cigarettes and we were smoking and we were kind of like laughing and talking to them. And we were all in like a little bit more of a state of undress. We were kind of more in like pajamas or lingerie. And so far I have not seen that one.
Was that the one where Louis and Lestat were walking down the street or driving the car down the street?
Yes, I think that's the one. So I think it didn't quite make it on camera.
Yeah, because in episode 2, there's that scene with them driving down the street. You see people standing in the doorways, and I'm looking at every single doorway. I was like,
yeah,
Christie. So maybe it's
further
like
down. Yeah.
when they went past you, they were on the other side because he keeps switching sides of the car. So we missed you.
And it was fascinating because the set was so incredibly huge, like city blocks long. And even if the scene was taking place, like right here, they filled the street with extras all the way down, like it felt like you were just like in a real like environment, like a stage play that was going on. So I was probably a little bit further down. And that is, I believe, the very first scene I filmed. So I was like extra nervous that night.
So even if you don't make it on camera, you're still contributing to the environment of the set that is helping the other actors act. And you're still part of the process.
That's a really good way of saying it. Absolutely. Like, it's incredible how it just comes alive. And I was fascinated by the person who was in charge of the background, like the background director. She was a very nice lady. Again, I apologize, I don't remember her name. You meet so many people on set. I mean, it was fascinating just to like watch her, like, you'd all line up and then she would just take people and place them here and here and here and be like, okay, you're going to make this coffee right here. You're going to walk by and carry this bit, like the whole thing was such a impressive production.
So in the scene with Louis and Paul's fight where you're standing in the street, tell us about that night.
So that was the same night as the dog scene. So it was freezing. And that we had done, I got to set late. I don't remember why I think like hair took a long time. Something happened that I actually got there late after all of the other extras. So like I kind of like walked on a set and there was like a long line. I mean, I think there was like 60, 70 of us that night. And they pulled me forward, me and one of the other working girls who was like in that brothel scene. And then they had us start to do like act around that fight and things that didn't quite make it. So when you see like Bricktop Williams shoving the brother outside of the door. Wait, was it Bricktop who did that? The start of the fight. There was a whole thing where we were like reacting to it and walking across the street and then like kind of forming up in the circle. So we did that all at the beginning of the night. Then we went back into holding. And at the very end of the night, like an hour before sunrise, they pulled us back out. But then they had me and only 3 other extras. And then we refilmed the scene with the closer camera angle with Lestat. And that was the first time I got like really nervous because instead of all of like the hundreds of background extras, it was only the 4 of us. And like all of production like made a semicircle behind the camera. So there was like hundreds of people watching. Myself, the 3 other background actors, Lestat and Louis. So that was a really, really fun night. But I remember being very like excited and nervous and cold.
So in that scene, you're with the 2 other people. There's a man and a woman, and you're kind of like whispering at him.
Yes.
You're just like improvising some reactions. What were you actually doing back there?
We were told like to walk out to this cue and to this mark and to react to the fight that was going on. And so the gentleman I was with, he was really nice. He was somebody who was, I guess, purchasing or negotiating with me for the evening. And so we get distracted. So we walk over and like the director told us to like act a little bit intrigued, but a little bit like, oh gosh, what's going on? And so that was kind of improvisation. And you just have to like go with whatever works, but then you have to keep repeating it exactly. At one point, the director did come up to me and that guy specifically. And he asked us to act like a little less scared and a little bit more gossipy. So we did get some like acting direction with it. But the whispering in his ear and like holding onto his arm scared. It was all like improv. And then we were asked to kind of like, asked to like walk away. So I kind of like shoved him back into the house. Like, let's get out of here. But yeah, it's really interesting to me because you do get direction as a background actor, but it's kind of more like hit this cue here and here. And then you're expected to just take it in and react to the scene. And you do a couple rehearsals. So you start to like get the idea of like what you think you want to do. And if it works or it doesn't work, you get that feedback in the moment.
So what were some of your favorite moments of the whole experience?
I really, like I said, I'm a newbie to this. So just seeing what a film set operated like, I really liked the costuming experience and working with everybody in wardrobe. They were an incredibly nice and talented and professional team. And it was so fun to walk into their headquarters. So this was like 2 or 3 days before filming. And you walk in and you see the storyboards of all of the character concepts everywhere. And you see like the rows and rows of costumes. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at like all the time. They were even playing like time period music in the background. And then like for an hour, I was just trying on like, I don't know, at least 10 costumes. I thought that was so fun. And then they would select which ones they wanted. And then when you got to set, it was really funny because when you got to set, it was like none of the ones they actually selected. They just gave you something different, which I thought was so like interesting.
So that blue skirt outfit wasn't one of the ones that you had tried on?
It was definitely not. Yeah. The only one that like made it from the original costume fitting to filming was this like white negligee thing, but that was the night that ended up being rescheduled. And when it was rescheduled in May, they handed me a different costume. And they changed the whole hair look. But I thought costumes was like very fun to watch. And I guess like maybe from a circus background, I just like love costumes in general. So I thought that was super interesting. Another really cool thing that happened was the fight scene night. It was cold. So we were told in between every take, whether that was a minute or 20 minutes, to put on our ropes and go right back inside into those buildings that you see. But all of those buildings, they were just like kind of like they're fake facades. There was nothing on the inside except like little box rooms. And the one that I was assigned to go into happened to be like the director that evening's like station. So I would like step into the little room with one other extra, put my little robe on, hold my little dog. And I got to stand behind the director with his multiple screens and watch him replay the shot we like literally just did. And to see it on all the different cameras, like right after we did it was both great as like, I can watch myself for feedback and kind of like see what I liked and didn't like, but it was also the coolest experience to be sitting behind the director, like watching him do his thing with the screens. And I think I had wrote as a status, like he had old timey music on, like the wind was billowing the lace curtain. And it just felt like, I was like, is this a dream? This is so cool. Yeah. What else was like really cool?
Was voiceover something you want to talk about?
Oh yeah. That was, unexpected. Again, being the newbie, I didn't really, I was going with the flow most of the time, but the brothel scene, we filmed it and then we got set back to holding and then we were pulled back out again. And I was confused when we were pulled out because the scene was kind of like deconstructed a bit. And there was like chairs just set up in a circle and like they closed the room off with like some panel of sheets. And I was thinking like, what is this? Nobody explained it to me because everybody else was experienced. And we all sat down on the chairs with all of the main actors and they all started reading the script. And the girls in the doorway and myself, we had to laugh when, and then Louis like turned around and yelled at us for it. And we did a voiceover take. So we had to just like laugh when we were supposed to laugh and gasp when we were supposed to gasp. And that was really interesting and unexpected. I did not know what was going on. At first, I just stayed really silent because I was like, oh, the actors are doing something. Like maybe we're just here to support them. And then another like extra nudged me and she's like, no, you're supposed to laugh. Like I was like, oh,
it was like an ADR recording.
Yeah. And I didn't know. And I learned on the fly.
So when you were standing in the doorway, actually filming the scene, was there no microphone there to pick up your laughing on the spot?
If it was hidden.
So that's probably why they needed the ADR, right? Because
yeah, I mean, if they're probably like they probably were. We did like make all like the reaction sounds live, but interesting. I noticed for the fight scene, we were not making any of that noise you hear in the background. Like you hear everybody kind of gasping and reacting. None of that was happening. It was actually dead quiet except the actors. So they had filled that in somewhere later.
Oh, cool. That's so interesting.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay.
I remember you talking in the chat about how Sam Reid's performance affected you.
Yeah. When we were filming the fight scene with the closer take at the end of the night, I had not seen Sam Reid Lestat close at all. Like he was always kind of like in the distance. And it was really interesting. We were sitting in a little semicircle and he came out of some house, like, I don't know, 15 feet away from me and stepped right out. And he was wearing that throwback to the movie, the 94 film Interview with the Vampire, like that same costume. So he stepped out and I don't know if he was being very method, but he took one step forward and he looked like straight at me and the other extras, and he just like stared. And he was in the Lestat attire. And so it was immediately recognizable as Lestat. And I just remember like he was not breaking eye contact. And I was kind of like, no, like, okay.
Like what I do? Why me?
Yeah.
Are you gonna eat me? What's going on?
Exactly. Like to me, it was like the character of a book I grew up loving and reading as my whole entire life, like just literally stepping out right in front of me with the context of the set. I was a little, that was like the one moment I got a little bit like, I guess, starstruck. I was a little bit like, oh my God, like, look, it's Lestat. He's wearing that outfit. Yeah, that was a really cool moment. So I never got to talk to him, but we did hang out with Jacob Anderson like all night filming that brothel scene. And he was very, like, all of the actors were so incredibly like nice to us. Like there was never that like feeling on set of like, I guess like hierarchy or something. Nobody ever just treated us like the background actors.
No diva.
Exactly. Yeah. Bricktop Williams kept turning around and being like, ladies, you're beautiful, work it. And then the doctor, the guy who plays the doctor who comes in kept offering his chair to some of us. And then Jacob Anderson, he would just like lean against the wall and talk and joke with us. He would apologize like every time he like bumped me because he had to like kind of shove past me a little bit. But I just remember hearing him speak outside of character, and I have never seen the Game of Thrones. I honestly did not know who Jacob Anderson was before this. And I was like, oh, you're British? And like everybody burst out laughing, and he was like, yeah, I'm British. And I was like, oh, it's almost like you're an actor or something. And then like he started laughing. But yeah, they were all very friendly and all very professional, but they talked to us when there was a moment to talk to us, and everybody was incredibly kind and very welcoming.
You keep mentioning the doctor. Are you talking about Finn who comes in and says there's more trouble, or was there actually a doctor character too?
No, maybe he's not a doctor. When they say call a doctor, the man who pushes past us into the room.
Okay, yeah, he's like the bodyguard guy who comes in.
Yeah, okay, not the doctor. So
I was like, no, there could have been a doctor. He could have gotten cut out too, because they did talk about calling the doctor.
Yeah. And so I guess they thought he was a doctor. Oh, I guess not, because then he covers his nose and acts. That would be a bad doctor. Yeah. That person, that character who shoved past us, he was very kind. And he kept being like, do you want to sit down? Do you want to sit down? Like offer his chair. And we're like, no, we're okay. Yeah. I mean, like, I can't emphasize enough how every individual person I met in this process, from like the costume to the COVID tester to Jacob Anderson to the director, were like, so professional, kind, and welcoming. Like the whole time, I just felt like, this is a really nice thing to be a part of. And I kept telling my friends, I'm like, even if I didn't make it into any scene at all, this experience was incredibly worth it.
Oh, congratulations. That's so amazing.
Thank
I'm
you.
so proud of you. I was like, my friend is in the show.
Yeah, it happened. I didn't think it was. I was applying for I guess I started applying November and didn't hear anything. And by January, I was like, oh, I'm probably not going to get it.
I remember those casting calls. A lot of them are coming up. They were looking for, people for Grace's wedding. They were looking for just people walking down the street. And the sex worker roles kept coming up. And we, as fans, often discuss, like, with this change of Louis is now a brothel owner, now sex workers are featured in the show. How is that going to go? Is it going to be like really uncomfortable with that kind of TV cliche of just putting sexy women on the screen to get ratings? How's the show going to handle it? And we didn't know, but the way it turned out was nothing like what we were afraid of.
Yeah. I mean, I think they did it really tastefully, and they stayed true to like the time period and the realities of that. And yeah, at no time did I feel like it was like, it felt exploiting. It just felt like we were telling a story, and they are staying true to, like, again, like that time period and what a brothel was like back then.
And even when it got to the part for you to be topless, you said it was your choice not to do it, right? And they were fine with that?
So yeah, at any time, any of us could have been like, hey, I'm not comfortable with being topless anymore. And they would have been like, that's okay. So what ended up happening with me was the cue they gave me was just to open my shirt and as I moved and like reacted to things going on, let whatever happen. And I honestly think that because that costume didn't really fit me, like I said, it was very tight. It actually just like held open here the whole time and did not slip, which I wasn't really paying attention, so I had no idea if it was or if it wasn't. And there was a lady next to me who was full topless the whole time, but it seemed that she was like covered by other people. It didn't make it to the final cut. But yeah, at any time we could have been like, hey, I'm not comfortable with that. And they check that everywhere. They check that all through the costumes process too. They would put something on as like, do you like this? Are you comfortable in this? Do you want to change this, etc.?
I'm so glad you were able to make it back down there to do that scene. Because when the rescheduling, I remember you were so stressed. You didn't know if you'd be able to get off work. You didn't know if you'd be able to like make the flight, because getting down there to do it makes the pay that you get for it not really worth it. Right. But you're doing it as a fan. You're passionate about this. And I'm so glad because it turned out so great.
Yes. And it was all very last minute too. So you just kind of had to be ready to go at any time, which I have learned is how the entire film industry works.
So if we know they're getting a season 2, if they do anything more in America, if it's not all in Europe, which it might be, would you want to try to do this again?
Yeah, totally. I mean, even if it's just to see my friends again that I made down there, like everybody is so wonderful. I would love to, like, I guess, go out for it another time. Yeah, my experience was so incredible as a fan, but it was also just like an incredible, like kind of life-changing experience just to like say like, hey, I worked on this set and now I do this it's sort of become like a side hustle. I got my first Chicago background acting gig and I do it when my schedule allows and when I can. And as just a performer by profession with the circus world, it's kind of like a nice compliment. So yeah, I would absolutely do it again. Also, I just very much love the city of New Orleans and I'm constantly back and forth from there. And I have a lot of circus connections, so I'm always down to visit.
Well, we'll be down to visit in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, the Vampire Ball. I'm so
I can't wait to see you again.
Fancy.
We're going to be fabulous at
We're
the
going to be
Vampire
so
Ball.
fabulous. Yes. And then the second line will be fun.
Oh yeah, for Anne.
Yeah,
they're
I'm
doing
really
a
looking forward to
commemorative
that.
second line memorial service for Anne Rice.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and telling us all about this. This was so fascinating. When you were doing this, you couldn't tell us anything. It was all top secret, NDA, and now we finally get the whole story. Thank you so much, Kristi.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me about it. I'm happy to talk about how great it was.
All right. See you soon.
Thank you.